Eleanor never thought the smell of barbecue smoke would be the thing that broke her open. But there she was standing on the sidewalk outside the house she had grown up in, suitcase beside her, keys taken, door locked, listening to laughter and music drifting over the backyard fence. Her parents' voices, their friends' voices, the sound of celebration. They had kicked her out that morning, given her 2 hours to gather her things, told her she was ungrateful and difficult and that they needed peace in their home. And by that same evening, the same evening they had fired up the grill, called their friends, and thrown a party, Eleanor stood on that sidewalk for a long moment. The anger she felt was not hot, it was cold, focused. The kind of clarity that arrives when something so outrageous happens that your mind simply cuts through everything and lands on one single thought. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and took one photograph. She had no idea that photography would change everything. For her parents, for herself, and for hundreds of thousands of people who were about to see exactly what kind of people threw a party the day they made their daughter homeless. They threw a party the same day they made their daughter homeless, and she was standing right outside with her phone in her hand. Before I take you inside Eleanor's story, if you have ever given everything to people who gave nothing back, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what she did with one single photograph, you are going to want to see every second of it. My name is Eleanor. I was 29 years old, living in Phoenix, Arizona, and from the outside my situation looked simple enough: a young woman living at home, working remotely, saving money. That was the version my parents offered whenever anyone asked. The fuller version was considerably more complicated. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, decent income, consistent clients, enough to live independently if I had chosen to. But 3 years earlier, when my parents hit a serious financial rough patch, I made a decision that felt like love at the time. I stayed, I contributed, I told myself family shows up for family. That belief, I would eventually learn, was only operating in one direction. My father Richard was charming in public, quick with a joke, generous with a handshake, the kind of man who made excellent first impressions at neighborhood gatherings and church picnics. My mother Pamela was softer in presentation but sharper underneath. She processed everything through a lens of appearances, of how things looked to the people whose opinions she collected like currency. Together they functioned well as a social unit. Inside the house it was different. Inside the house there was a persistent, low-grade current of criticism that ran through almost every interaction. Nothing Eleanor did was quite right. Nothing was quite enough. The bar existed, it simply moved every time I came close to reaching it. Here is what my parents told their friends: that Eleanor was living at home rent-free, saving money, being looked after. Here is what was actually happening. Every single month for 3 years I transferred $800 directly into the household account my father managed. I covered the grocery runs, planned, shopped, paid. When the water heater failed, I put it on my card. When the property tax came in short, I covered the gap. When my mother needed a car repair, she couldn't afford, I handled it without being asked twice. I was not a daughter being supported by her parents. I was a financial contributor living inside a household that had quietly rewritten the arrangement to suit a more comfortable story. The money was manageable. What wore me down was something harder to name. It was the way my father corrected my opinions at dinner like I was still 12 years old. It was my mother commenting on my appearance, my social life, my career choices with the casual authority of someone who believed her perspective was simply facts. It was the way my contributions to the household were never acknowledged, not once, not privately, not in passing, while my presence was treated as something they were graciously permitting. I was funding a life inside a house where I was simultaneously invisible and under constant low-level scrutiny. That combination does something specific to a person over time. It hollows things out quietly. Sometime around month 18, I started saving separately. A second account my parents didn't know about: small deposits, consistent, deliberate. I wasn't angry when I opened it, I was clear. There is a difference. Anger is reactive and loud. Clarity is quiet and moves in a straight line. I could see, without drama or self-pity, that the situation I was in was not going to change organically. My parents were comfortable. The arrangement benefited them in ways they had no intention of examining honestly. If I was going to leave, and I was going to leave, it needed to be on my terms, with enough saved to land somewhere stable. I was building a runway. I just didn't know I was going to need it sooner than planned. It started over a plumbing issue in the second bathroom, a repair that had been needed for months and that I had been quietly researching contractors for. When the quote came in at $340, I sat down with my parents and, for the first and only time in 3 years, suggested we split it 3 ways since we all used the house equally. My father's expression shifted immediately. My mother set down her fork. What followed was not a conversation. It was a performance, my father's voice rising through carefully graduated stages of indignation, my mother adding quiet, pointed commentary from the side. I had asked to share one bill. I was made to feel I had committed something unforgivable. The ultimatum came the following morning at breakfast, delivered by my father with the particular calm of someone who had rehearsed it overnight. He told me the living arrangement was no longer working, that I had shown my true character by turning household matters into financial negotiations, that they needed peace in their home, and my attitude was making that impossible. He gave me until the following morning to gather my belongings. My mother sat at the table holding her coffee mug and said nothing. I looked at them both for a long moment. I did not cry. I did not argue. I simply nodded, pushed back my chair, and walked to my room where I began, quietly and methodically, to pack. I was up before sunrise. Not because I had slept badly, I had barely slept at all. I moved through my room with the focused efficiency of someone who has mentally rehearsed every step already. 2 large bags, 1 box, my laptop case. My design equipment is carefully wrapped. I did not play music. I did not cry. I worked through the space methodically, opening drawers, clearing shelves, making decisions quickly and without sentimentality. My parents' bedroom door stayed closed the entire time. No goodbye appeared in the hallway, no last-minute softening. Just the sound of my own movements through a house that had taken 3 years of my income and was returning nothing but a closed door and a deadline. Jade answered on the first ring when I called the night before, because that is exactly who Jade has always been. By the time I pulled into her apartment complex that morning, she was already standing in the parking lot with coffee in both hands and the particular expression of someone who is furious on your behalf, but holding it together for your sake. She didn't overwhelm me with questions or commentary. She took the box from my arms, led me upstairs, showed me where the extra blankets were, and said simply, "You stay as long as you need. No conversation required until you're ready." I sat on her couch and felt, for the first time in 3 years, completely safe. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when I remembered it. My external hard drive, 3 years of client files, design assets, project archives, everything professionally irreplaceable, sitting in the drawer of my desk back at the house. My stomach dropped completely. Jade watched my face change and immediately said, "Go now, before you talk yourself out of it." I drove back across Phoenix in the late morning sun, rehearsing the interaction in my head, quick, simple, in and out. I would knock, retrieve the drive, leave, clean and fast. I was not prepared for what I found when I turned onto my parents' street. I heard it before I saw it. Music, laughter, the unmistakable smell of charcoal smoke drifting over the fence. I pulled up slowly and sat in my car for a moment before getting out. Through the side fence I could see the backyard clearly, folding tables set up on the grass, a cooler near the back wall, my father standing at the grill with a set of tongs, and a wide, relaxed smile I recognized as his company smile. His best one, reserved for moments he was enjoying publicly. My mother was moving between guests with a plate of something, laughing at something someone had said. Neighbors, family friends, people who had known me my entire life, gathered in the backyard of the house I had financially supported for 3 years. On the same afternoon, I had been given 2 hours to leave it. I stood on the sidewalk outside the fence for longer than I should have. Long enough to confirm that what I was seeing was exactly what it appeared to be, not a coincidence, not a previously planned event that happened to fall on this particular day. This was spontaneous, celebratory, the energy of people gathered specifically because something had been resolved in a way that pleased them. My eviction was not a difficult morning my parents were quietly recovering from. It was an occasion. I understood then, with a clarity that arrived completely without drama, that I had never been a daughter to these people in the way I had always believed. It had been an inconvenience they had finally managed to remove. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't think about it analytically at that moment. I didn't construct a plan or consider consequences or rehearse what I would write in a caption. It was instinctive. The photographer's instinct, maybe, from years of working visually. Document what is real. Document what is actually happening in front of you. I raised my phone above the fence line, framed the shot carefully, my father at the grill, my mother beside him, guests visible in the background, the whole cheerful scene laid out in one single image, and pressed the shutter. One photograph, taken in under 4 seconds. I looked at it once on the screen, then I put my phone back in my pocket and went to get my hard drive. I sat in Jade's parking lot that evening for 20 minutes before going inside. I had the hard drive. I had the photograph on my phone. I opened it again and looked at it properly, really looked at it this time. My father's smile. My mother's easy laughter. The folding tables and the cooler and the neighbors who had watched me grow up standing in my parents' backyard drinking lemonade on the afternoon, their daughter left with 2 bags and a box. Something settled in my chest as I looked at it. Not rage, something quieter and more deliberate than rage. I understood exactly what I was holding. This was not just a photograph. This was the entire truth of my situation compressed into a single undeniable image. Jade cleared her kitchen table that same evening and set down a notepad, 2 pens, and a fresh cup of coffee in front of me without saying a word. She sat across from me and looked at me steadily. "Walk me through everything," she said. "Every single thing you contributed to that house. Start from the beginning." So I did. I talked for nearly 2 hours. Every payment, every grocery run, every emergency expense absorbed without complaint or reimbursement. Jade wrote while I talked, neat, organized, categorical. When I finally stopped, she looked down at the pages in front of her and then back up at me. "Eleanor," she said quietly, "you need to see these numbers on paper." The following morning, I logged into every account I had used over the past 3 years and began pulling statements. It took most of the day, cross-referencing transactions, identifying household-related payments, organizing everything chronologically. The monthly $800 transfers were easy, consistent, clearly labeled, a clean paper trail. But the additional expenses were staggering when assembled together. Grocery receipts paid on my card. Utility transfers when accounts ran short. The water heater, the car repair, the property tax shortfall. 2 emergency medical bills my father hadn't mentioned to anyone outside the family. Each transaction had my name on it. Each one was dated and time-stamped. 3 years of financial contribution, documented with the kind of precision that makes arguments impossible. Jade found the attorney, a woman named Claire Hendricks who specialized in tenant rights and civil disputes. I sent her a summary email that same evening. She responded within the hour asking for a full consultation the following morning. I sat across from Claire in her downtown Phoenix office and laid out everything: the 3-year arrangement, the monthly payments, the additional contributions, the eviction timeline, the 2-hour notice. Claire listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she looked at me with the calm directness of someone who has heard many complicated situations and knows immediately when one has legal merit. "Based on what you've described," she said, "you were not a guest in that house. You were a tenant, and your rights were violated." Claire drafted the formal letter within 48 hours. It was addressed to both my parents by full name, referenced specific Arizona tenant protection statutes, and outlined in precise legal language the nature of my financial contributions and the manner in which the eviction had been executed without proper notice or process. It requested an itemized accounting of all funds received from me over the 3-year period and demanded the return of a security deposit equivalent based on documented monthly payments. It gave them 14 days to respond. I read it 3 times before Claire sent it. Every sentence was measured and accurate and completely devastating in the way that only clean, factual legal language can be. I told her to send it. While Claire worked on the legal side, Jade and I finished the complete financial accounting. We went through every statement, every receipt I still had saved digitally, every transaction I could identify and categorize. When we added the final column, monthly payments, grocery expenses, emergency contributions, household repairs, medical bills, the total sat at $67,340. I stared at that number for a long time. Jade sat beside me in complete silence. $67,000, contributed over 3 years to a household that had this week given me 2 hours to vacate. That number changed something about how I understood my own story. It transformed a narrative about a difficult family situation into something with a specific, documented, undeniable shape. I opened the photograph on my phone and held it for a long moment. Then I opened my social media account, not a large following, nothing influential, just the ordinary digital presence of a regular 29-year-old woman. I wrote the caption carefully. No drama, no excessive emotion, just facts stated plainly in the exact order they occurred. This morning, my parents gave me 2 hours to leave the house I had contributed over $67,000 to over 3 years. By this afternoon, they were hosting a barbecue. I was standing on the sidewalk when I took this photo. I looked at it once more, added nothing, removed nothing, posted it with the photograph attached, put my phone face down on Jade's coffee table, and tried to sleep. I woke at 5:52 a.m. to Jade shaking my shoulder, her eyes wide, her phone already in her hand, her expression caught somewhere between disbelief and electric excitement. "Eleanor, you need to see this right now." I sat up slowly, still half asleep, reached for my phone and turned it over. The screen was a continuous wall of notifications, comments, shares, messages from strangers, all arriving faster than the display could organize them. I opened the post. The photograph was sitting at 94,000 shares. The caption had been screenshotted and was circulating separately with hundreds of thousands of reactions. I sat there in the early morning quiet of Jade's apartment, phone in both hands, and understood that something had left my control entirely and was now doing something I hadn't planned for. By 7 a.m., the post had crossed 200,000 shares. By 9 a.m., it was trending on two separate platforms simultaneously. I sat at Jade's kitchen table with my coffee going cold beside me, watching the numbers move in real time like something alive and completely beyond anything I could have anticipated. Jade had taken the day off work without discussion. She simply texted her office and sat down beside me because that is who she is. Neither of us spoke much. We just watched. Every few minutes, the share count jumped again, not gradually, but in lurches, like something catching new wind every time it landed in a different corner of the internet. My plain, factual caption was being read by strangers across the country, and they were furious on my behalf. By midday, my email had 47 unread messages from journalists, producers, and media outlets. Local Phoenix news stations had picked up the story first, two of them running segments by early afternoon. Then national outlets followed. A morning show producer reached out requesting a live interview. A major digital publication had already run a written piece using only the photograph and caption, no additional comment needed from anyone because the image said everything with complete clarity. The framing across every outlet was remarkably consistent. This was not a simple family disagreement. This was a story about financial exploitation dressed as parental authority, and the photograph was proof that the people responsible felt absolutely no remorse about any of it. I made myself read the comments, not all of them, but enough to understand the current running underneath the numbers. What I found was not what I expected. It wasn't cruelty or skepticism or the particular cynicism the internet is known for deploying at moments like this. It was recognition. Thousands of people described their own versions of the same arrangement, adult children who had financially supported parents while being simultaneously diminished and controlled. People who had never put numbers to their own contributions until they read mine and started doing the math in their heads. The comment that stopped me completely was from a woman who wrote simply, "I needed someone to say this out loud so I could finally admit it happened to me too. My father called at 2:17 p.m. I watched his name appear on my screen for 3 full rings before I answered. He did not begin with hello. He began with my name, sharp and clipped, and then moved immediately into the architecture of controlled fury I had grown up navigating. The post needed to come down. I had embarrassed the family in front of people they had known for decades. I had twisted the situation to make myself look like a victim. His voice climbed steadily through the call, the graduated escalation I knew so well. When he finally paused, I said, very calmly, "Dad, anything further needs to go through my attorney." The silence on his end lasted 4 full seconds. Then the call ended. By early evening, my parents had posted their own statement across their social media accounts. It was long, scripture-adjacent in its language, and constructed entirely around reframing themselves as patient, generous parents who had simply reached a difficult decision after years of trying. It described the living arrangement as an act of charity on their part. It suggested I had been difficult and ungrateful. It implied the financial contributions I had referenced were exaggerated or misremembered. 3 specific sentences directly contradicted the timeline they had previously described to mutual acquaintances. I screenshotted every inconsistency immediately and forwarded them to Claire. She responded within minutes. "This is extraordinarily helpful." They just contradicted their own position in writing and published it publicly. Claire moved quickly. Within 24 hours of my parents' public statement, she had filed formal documentation with the Arizona Civil Court, incorporating their own published words as evidence of both the arrangement's nature and their awareness of it. Their statement had attempted to reframe the situation, but had instead confirmed several key facts Claire needed established on record: the duration of my residence, the nature of the living arrangement, and the manner of the eviction. My parents had posted publicly, without legal guidance, in an attempt to control a narrative. Instead, they had handed Claire exactly what she needed to strengthen a case that was already well constructed. The attorney my parents eventually hired called Claire's office the following morning, requesting an urgent conversation. A financial journalist named Marcus Webb published a detailed analytical piece on the 3rd day, not an opinion column, but a structured breakdown of the documented numbers. He had obtained nothing private. Everything he cited came from my original caption and the public record Claire had filed. But assembled together, sourced and attributed and presented with journalistic precision, the $67,340 figure became impossible to contextualize as anything other than what it was. The piece was shared 180,000 times in its first 12 hours. My parents' names were in the 4th paragraph. Their neighborhood was mentioned in the sixth. By the time the article finished circulating, there was not a person in their social circle who had not read exactly what had been taken, and exactly how the people who took it had chosen to spend that particular afternoon. Claire called me on a Tuesday morning with a specific tone in her voice, the measured satisfaction of an attorney who has watched a case land exactly where she believed it would. My parents' lawyer had formally requested mediation, not court, not a public hearing. Mediation, private, structured, and significantly less visible than what a civil filing would produce if this continued forward. Claire explained the options clearly and let me decide without pressure. I thought about it for less than 30 seconds. Mediation meant a room, a table. My documentation was laid out in front of the people who had handed me a suitcase and fired up a grill the same afternoon. I told Claire to confirm the appointment. I was ready for that room. The mediation was held in a neutral office in downtown Phoenix, clean, spare, professionally impersonal. I arrived 12 minutes early. Laid my documentation on the table in front of my seat, bank statements organized chronologically, the complete financial summary, Claire's legal filing, and the screenshotted inconsistencies from my parents' own public statement. When Richard and Pamela walked in with their attorney, I did not stand. I did not smile. I looked at them directly and waited. My father's eyes moved immediately to the documents on the table. Something shifted in his expression, a brief, involuntary recalibration. He had walked in expecting the daughter who always softened, always accommodated, always found a way to make difficult moments easier for everyone else in the room. That daughter had not come today. Their attorney opened professionally, attempting to reframe the financial contributions as informal family support rather than a structured tenancy arrangement. Claire let him finish without interruption. Then she opened her folder and began presenting. Transaction by transaction, date by date, amount by amount. $67,340, documented, sourced, legally categorized, and completely irrefutable. When Claire finished presenting, the bank records their attorney leaned toward my father and spoke quietly. My father's jaw tightened. My mother looked at the table. Their attorney straightened his papers and spoke the words that confirmed everything. My clients are prepared to discuss a resolution. I looked at Claire. She looked at me. Neither of us said anything. We simply waited, calmly, patiently, and completely in control. The settlement took 90 minutes to finalize. My parents agreed to return $41,000, a figure that accounted for documented monthly payments, verified additional expenses, and the improper eviction process under Arizona tenant protection law. It was not everything. Claire had been honest with me from the beginning that full recovery of every dollar was unlikely. But $41,000, returned formally and in writing, signed by both my parents in the presence of their own attorney, was not a partial victory. It was complete accountability dressed in practical clothing. I signed the agreement with steady hands. My parents signed without looking at me. We left through the same door without exchanging a single word. The silence between us was not uncomfortable. It was finished. I signed the lease on my apartment 2 weeks after the mediation. Third floor, east-facing. A kitchen window that caught the morning light in a way that made the whole room glow amber for about 20 minutes every day. I stood in the center of the empty living room on move-in day, bare walls, clean floors, complete silence, and stayed there for a long time. No criticism drifting down a hallway. No low-grade current of judgment running beneath every interaction. Just space, mine, chosen, paid for honestly, belonging to no version of myself that had to shrink to fit someone else's comfort. I had lived inside other people's definitions of who I was for 29 years. These walls had never met that version of me. 3 months after moving in, I launched a free online resource called Know Your Worth, a straightforward guide for adult children navigating financial contributions within family living arrangements. It covered tenant rights by state, how to document financial contributions properly, what legal options exist when informal arrangements are exploited, and how to recognize the difference between family support and family financial abuse. I built it alone over 4 weekends, drew on everything Claire had taught me, and posted it without expectation. Within its first month, it had reached 200,000 people. Claire agreed to provide a free monthly legal Q&A session through the platform. Jade designed the entire site without charging me a single dollar. Some things, built from the hardest experiences, become exactly the thing someone else needed most. So here is what I want you to understand about that photograph. I did not take it for revenge. I did not take it to humiliate anyone or to launch a campaign or to go viral. I had no framework for any of that standing on that sidewalk. I took it because something in me refused to let that moment be rewritten later, refused to let it be softened or explained away or rearranged into something more comfortable than what it actually was. Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is simply document the truth, clearly, without embellishment, without apology, and trust that the truth is enough. It was enough. It always was. And if someone in your life is counting on your silence right now, pick up your phone.